안녕하세요, 여러분의 한국어 선생님 고빌리입니다. Welcome to the third part of my series where I analyze the Korean speaking of MONSTA X. For those of you, though, who are here for the first time, I'm a Korean teacher who's been learning Korean for over 20 years and teaching it here on YouTube for over 13 years. And so far, I've looked at Shonu and Minhyuk. And today, I'll be sharing my full analysis of ki-hyun. So I'll be sharing everything that I noticed about him over these past 4 weeks. And this will be information that you're definitely missing out on if you don't already understand Korean, including how he sounds in Korean, any unique expressions that he uses, as well as sharing things about his speaking and writing that stands out to me as a Korean teacher. But first, thank you to the sponsor of this video, my incredible Patreon supporters who help keep the lights on, as well as my YouTube channel members. It's thanks to you that I don't have to fill this video series with advertisements. And if you're not already one of my Patreon supporters, please consider joining right now. It helps me to keep my videos free and to make more Korean learning content, such as Korean video courses, cheat sheets, study notebooks, and weekly lessons. So check out the link to my Patreon page in the description, and you'll also get some cool benefits when you join. Okay, so today I'll be looking at ki-hyun, whose full name is ki-hyun.
Oh! ki-hyun! ki-hyun! ki-hyun!
ki-hyun was originally born in November of 1993 in the city of Cheongju, which is just south of Seoul in the Chungcheong province, although he grew up in the city of Goyang, northwest of Seoul. His role in MONSTA X is main vocals, and before debuting, he enjoyed singing since he was in elementary school, and his first experience ever performing was when he joined Starship Entertainment. In his free time, he also likes cameras and taking photos, and I found that he even did a photo exhibition a couple years ago just for his fans.
11월을 담은 순간 Moments of blah blah November. 집에 있는 사진들을 이렇게 제가 집에 있을 때 주로 활동하는 그런 이제
So before I look at ki-hyun's speech, let's just talk about my first impressions. And I'll be sharing a few clips in this video from my research because I don't want to get this video taken down. So here's just the first clip that I want to share with you.
여러분들 사셔서 혹시 사신 분들 계시다면 앨범을 사신 분들 계시다면 과감하게 앨범을 끊어주세요. 과감하게 이렇게 그러라고 만든 앨범입니다.
My first impression is that while a lot of the members seem really outgoing and social, ki-hyun mostly seems to prefer keeping to himself. Also, he apparently loves fried chicken.
제가 또 이제 저녁 라이브를 진행하면 하고 싶다고 한 게 한 가지 있었는데요. 바로 뭐냐? 또 이 치킨을 먹으면서 라이브 하기 했습니다.
Oh, that looks good.
그래요. 뭐야 이거? 치킨은 식어도 맛있어요.
He also likes reading, taking photos, drawing, and he seems very in touch with his sensitive side. So I can imagine that he'd be the kind of person who'd prefer to see a movie by himself rather than to go together with all the other members. I'm not sure, but I get that sort of impression because when I talk about his voice tone and his pronunciation in a bit, you'll see that he sounds really soft. In fact, let's start with that. Let's start by talking about his voice tone. And the first few days while I was preparing for this video series, I couldn't really tell which member was ki-hyun just by their voice, but I finally figured it out. So here's the first clip that I want to share. Try to listen to just how he sounds overall. So his voice tone, specifically about how soft it sounds.
저를 상우라고 부르시는 분들도 있고 저를 햄스터라고 부르시는 분들이 있어서 모두 만족시키기 위해서 두 캐릭터를 출시를 했습니다.
This clip he's presenting a plushie called 햄상이, which is a combination of the words 햄스터, meaning hamster, and 상어, meaning shark. So because he's doing like a presentation here, he's speaking louder and more clearly than he usually does. But overall, he still has a very soft tone. He's not stressing his pronunciation, his consonants. So that combined with the low tone of his voice makes his speech sound soft. At least I think it sounds really soft. And I have one more clip where he's just talking regularly here.
이른 시간부터 준비해서 이렇게 찍어봤는데 일단 너무 준비를 잘 해주셔가지고 우리 몬스타엑스의 자켓에 벗어나는 세계관을 가지고 오셔가지고 이상한 나라의 앨리스 같은 그런 느낌.
Notice how you can barely hear him under the music. So far of the three members that I've looked at, I think that ki-hyun will be the most difficult to translate for Korean learners. And his Korean sounds fine if you can hear it, but it's really soft. But that's not all. He's also doing something else that can make his voice sound even a bit softer, and as a result, possibly more difficult to translate. And here's a short clip of that.
들어왔습니다. 원래 다른 분들이 계셨는데 중간에 나가셔가지고 제가 중간에 잠시 로잉을 정말 멈추고 다시 찍은 시간이 14분 39초. 제 기준에서는 훌륭한. 중간에 한번 멈췄는데 이 정도 나왔으면 훌륭합니다.
He mumbles, meaning he's pronouncing words a bit loosely. And while I don't think most fluent speakers would really notice this, at least you wouldn't really care, if you're someone who's only just learned to understand Korean when it's pronounced in a certain way, so like most beginners, it might be a challenge to understand him. Now, he's not mumbling a lot, but to me, it was more noticeable since he already had a soft voice. So the first time that I heard him, my initial impressions were basically like soft voice, low voice, and slightly mumbling. But again, if you're able to focus just on videos where he's got a microphone on him and he's speaking louder, I really don't think this is going to be much of an issue if you want to use him for listening practice. For example, when they're doing like activities on their YouTube videos and they all have microphones and they're just laughing and shouting at each other, he's just as clear and easy to understand as anyone else.
아 이게 뭡니까? 나도 이렇게 하지 그럼. 아 엉덩이 내려.
There's also one more thing about his voice that really stood out, and it might not be what you're thinking it is. So right when I first started researching ki-hyun, I read online that he's open about having veneers on his teeth, and that because of this, he tends to have an issue with pronouncing the letter 시옷. That's the S letter. Essentially, this means that his veneers, having been put in a bit incorrectly, can cause him to have a slight lisp when he speaks. So he might pronounce S kind of like TH, like th. And he's talked about this issue before openly a few years ago, and I have a clip of him doing that here.
가끔 시옷 발음이 셀 때가 있는데 그 원인은 라미네이트가 잘못되어서라고 한 멤버들에게 가끔 놀림을 받는다.
They're making fun of him right now.
맞아요. 진짜? 제가 이제 앞니가 여기가 다 그 가짜이예요. 원래 모양이 제가 옆으로 봤을 때 이렇게 돼 있어야 되는데 라미네이트라면서 이게 이렇게 펴진 상태로 돼가지고 시옷 발음이 안 되는 거예요.
그러면 만약에 다시 하면은 그 시옷 발음 없어지는 거야? 그럼 다시 해. 다시 해. 라미네이트를 바꿔.
So instead of the word like 사랑, you might hear him say it as 사랑, almost. And I was prepared to talk about this in the video because this is unique to have a lisp. However, in reality, it's not really that strong. Now, here's one clip that I picked from a birthday event, and I picked it because he uses the word 생일, meaning birthday, which has that letter 시옷, many times. So see if you can hear anything.
네, mon-bebe, 일단 생일 너무 축하하고 정말 아까 댓글에도 막 가을에 생일이 생겨서 난 너무 좋아 막 이런 댓글을 봤는데 자기의 생일처럼 느껴져서 너무 고맙고 이렇게 작게나마 저희가 이렇게 좀 생일 축하를 좀 해봤는데 마음에 들었으면 좋겠습니다. 오늘 끝날 때까지 11시 59분까지 마음껏 우리 mon-bebe들과 함께 즐기다가 주무셨으면 좋겠어요. 생일 축하해요.
It's not that strong like some people with a lisp in Korea where you can really hear that it sounds like a TH sound. ki-hyun is still saying it mostly just like an S sound. And I have a few more clips that I want you to hear and pay really close attention and tell me if you can hear a lisp in any of them.
네, 이번 앨범 활동이 앞서서 굉장히 오랜만에 컴백이라 굉장히 뭔가 설레고 막 그랬었는데 그동안 준비해왔던 거 제대로 보여줄 수 있는 활동이 되었으면 좋겠어요. 네.
그 게임이 이거 아예 이기신 게 아니에요. 뭐라고요? 조율 좀 하세요. 이게 너무 좋아서 나는 했었어. 숲으로 나가곤 했는데 그곳에는 아무도 몰라야 할 비밀이 숨겨져 있었다. 그 비밀은 공주와 공주의 비밀 친구만 알고 있었어요. 비밀 친구는 신비로운 은빛 여우였는데 그 여우는 인간의 말을 이해할 수 있었어요.
Do you hear a lisp? Now, I can tell because I'm trying to listen for it. Like when he says the expression 활동이 없어서. It kind of sounds like 없어서, almost, barely, I guess.
네, 이번 앨범 활동이 없어서 굉장히 또 오랜만에 컴백이라 활동이 없어서 굉장히
But this isn't something that I would have noticed if I wasn't making this in-depth series and listening to a lot of videos of him speaking. However, this is something that some of his Korean fans notice and really like about his pronunciation. And I think it adds to his overall soft voice and makes him seem even friendlier. What do you think? Okay, but remember before I said this that I found something that stood out to me and that it wasn't what you think. And it wasn't this lisp, it was something different. Yes, there's something else besides his soft and low voice and besides the lisp. And I want you to listen to these short clips and see if you can find him doing anything else.
차라리 이런 게 훨씬 편하게 이런 게 좀 이렇게 또 깊은 게 좀 더 나은데 이런 거 안 입거나 진짜 얇은 거 입어야 되는 거 약간 호흡 섞어야 되나요? 여기는 가성이지? 내가 싫었다 기억나는 것 같다. 제가 신었다가 아마 민영이가 그게 나보고 신으라고 챙겨준 양말일걸? 이래가지고 제가 벗어줬던 것 같아요.
Did you notice anything else? Well, he sometimes stutters when he talks, and it's not a lot. And more importantly, it doesn't really make his speaking any more difficult to translate. It's just something to keep in mind. That's it. Moving on. You probably also want to know about how polite or casual he sounds in Korean. And I can tell you that first by actually showing you a clip where he's making a phone call to a member of a different music group actually named Uji from the group 17, I believe. So here's that clip.
우리 몬베베 분들에게 인사 한번 해주세요. 우리 또 세븐틴의 우지입니다. 세븐틴 우지라고 하려고. 예. 또 제 이제 생일마다 또 같은 생일이신 분께 저희 연락 행사 저한테 전화 안 하셨어요. 조금 서운합니다. 그래서 생일 축하드리고요. 예, 우리 팬분들께 뭐라고 하려고 할 말이 없네요. 예.
Now, Uji was born in 1996, so he's a full 3 years younger than ki-hyun. But the entire call, ki-hyun is speaking very respectfully. He even uses the verb 축하드리다 instead of 축하하다 when he says happy birthday, since they share the same birthday. And using 드리다 is a much more respectful way to say this. It's what you'd normally use to like strangers or just to people who are older than you, but you could also just use it to anyone you want to show extra respect toward. In fact, he's speaking very politely for most of this phone call, and he's trying to make his Korean sound more respectful to mon-bebe who are watching the live stream. So he uses the particle ge instead of the more casual ante or the standard particle ege, which all have the same meaning, to a person. Ge also is used in extra polite speech. You would use it if you're like giving a speech to a group of people or just to sound really respectful. He also frequently makes use of the formal verb ending nida. So like when you say 입니다, 합니다, anything like that. So if you hear anything that sounds like nida at the end, this is for formal speech and it sounds extra respectful. And while ki-hyun doesn't have to do any of this, he doesn't have to speak extra politely like most of the time like he does, he tends to choose to do so a lot. And many of his conversations with other people outside of MONSTA X that I heard sound extra respectful like this because of the words and the grammar that he chooses to use. Now, while he doesn't use this sort of polite speech toward the other 5 members of the group, since they're really more like just a family, he does have a noticeably conservative style of speaking with everyone else. And as a result of everything that I mentioned, overall, he really comes across as especially polite and a respectful person, both in how he acts and in how he speaks.
열심히 하고 나왔고 다치지 않게 건강히 잘 하고 왔으니까요. 이제 앞으로는 여러분들 앞에서 열심히 할 모습만 남은 것 같습니다. 많은 모습 보여드릴 테니까 많이 기대해 주시고 저는 이만 물러가 보도록 하겠습니다. 지금까지 병장 유기현이 아닌 이제는 몬스타엑스 기현의 저녁 기념 라이브였습니다. 안녕.
Okay, so that's everything about how he sounds. Now let's talk a little bit about his usage of filler words and any frequent words that I noticed him using. Now, it was kind of difficult to find him using any filler words excessively. I mean, he speaks, like I said, very politely. He uses many of the standard ones here and there, but finding filler words requires listening to hours of live streams and vlogs to see how someone actually talks in their daily life. And so I did that, and I found 2 filler words, but really it's just one that I want to point out that he uses a lot. So watch this video first and see if you can find which filler word he tends to prefer using.
조금 짧으면 조금 더 잘라서 여기로 올리던지 아니면 좀 더 길어서 그냥 이렇게 해도 이렇게 슉 돼야 되는데 조금 숙소에서 하기에는 조금 너무 뭐라 해야 될까 조금 성의가 좀 없어 보여가지고.
Yeah, if it's not obvious, the 2 words are 조금 and 좀. Now, both of these words have the same literal meaning. They both mean a little or a bit. In fact, originally the word 좀 is a shortened version of 조금, but 좀 also has one extra usage in that it's commonly used just to soften a sentence, so to make a sentence sound less direct. And this is especially useful if you're saying something like, if you're asking for something. For example, instead of asking someone to give you something with 주세요, like 김치 주세요, please give me kimchi, you could add 좀 before the verb and you could say 김치 좀 주세요, which has the same meaning, but now it sounds a little bit softer and a little bit more polite. And this is also really useful when you're expressing your opinion on something like ki-hyun is doing here, in order to make your opinion sound like less direct, kind of like instead of saying like, it is, you know, I think so, it seems to be, it has that sort of feel to it. And he uses both 조금 and 좀 a lot, but I found he still uses 좀 more often since it's useful for softening sentences. And I have one more clip here where he uses 좀 several times. Try to count for yourself. See how many times you can hear him using 좀.
잠깐 좀 고민 좀 해볼까? 전 3장이 다 있기 때문에 여러분 좀 고민을 길게 안 할 거예요. 저는 지금 스티커 부자이기 때문에 일단은 뭔가 걷는 느낌이 좀 이걸로 해야겠다. 저는 일부러 흰색 선이 좀 보이는 게 싫어서 좀 더 사진 쪽을 가까이에서 잘랐어요.
And here's one more clip.
불안해. 이거 좀 이렇게 높은 게 있으면 좀 불안해요. 떨어뜨릴까 봐 제가. 자, 이렇게 또 저도 궁금한 게 많고 몬베베들한테. 몬베베들도 저한테 굉장히 궁금한 게 많을 거잖아요. 평소 같으면 제가 콘텐츠도 올리고 뭐 근황도 전달하고 이러면서 이제 좀 궁금증이 해소가 됐을 텐데 또 어떻게 그렇게 안 됐다 보니까 좀 어떤 점을 궁금해하는지 몬베베들이 좀 확인을 해볼 텐데.
Now, to be fair, he's not doing this all the time or anything. It's just something for you to look out for. Okay, that's enough about how he speaks. Let's look now at how he writes. So I have a letter here that he wrote to mon-bebe from 2023. And honestly, his writing is what surprised me the most, more than anything else about him. I know, I'm a Korean teacher, so what I find surprising probably is going to be different than what you find surprising, but his writing is some of the best I've seen since I started making these analysis videos, and he definitely has the cleanest writing among all 6 members. Look at how all of his sentences stay within the lines of the paper, and the closer that I look, the more I like it. All of his letters, including letters that are normally written with shortcuts, are still written really smoothly. Look at the word mon-bebe, the letter on top. Mium, which is the M letter, is written correctly with 3 separate strokes and not made into an upside down pyramid, which is often the case with fast writing. I can tell he writes slowly and that he thought about what he wants to write before he started. And I don't see any scribbles or corrections. Another letter I often point out is lir, the L letter, and he writes this one a bit uniquely. For example, look in the second line at the word 글. First, when he writes this letter as a 받침, so at the bottom of a syllable like here, he writes it like a smooth snake. And this is a really common thing I see a lot of people do because it just saves a lot of time. But he does something different when this letter is the first letter in a word, and he does it in all of these cases. But one place you can really see it is the sentence that starts with the word 오히려. Notice that he writes lir with 4 separate strokes, which is the official stroke order for this letter. Now, he doesn't have to do this because the smooth snake, that thing I mentioned, is a common and acceptable shortcut in Korean handwriting. Most people do it like that. But he does it anyway because it's more proper. and it's more official. And I think he likes that. He only uses the smooth snake version when it's used as a 받침 because it takes up less space and makes it easier to keep the syllables looking balanced. So again, I see a lot of his writing is intentionally clean. Another letter to look out for is biup, the B letter, which is also using a common shortcut when he writes it. Now, I'll put the official stroke order here, I think maybe here on the screen, next to how ki-hyun writes it. So instead of writing it with 4 separate strokes, he writes it with just 2. Basically, you make a U shape and then you draw a short horizontal line at the bottom. And this is a very common shortcut that many people use to write this letter because it's a lot faster to do it this way than the official way. But I think that ki-hyun uses this shortcut here not because it's faster, like most people use it for, including myself, but I think that he uses this shortcut because it looks rounder and less strict, less sharp. He also added hearts to the end of some of his sentences, like in the last sentence here where he says, 사랑하고 빠빠이. Basically, I love you, bye-bye. And he adds lots of exclamation marks, so the letter reads like he's excited, as well as little giggling sounds. That's the first 2 letters after 감사할 따름입니다. Those little 2, the H letters, which are known as hyut at the end. It's kind of like saying haha or hehe. So this letter overall looks very smooth, and I think it sounds like friendly when you read it, and you can hear that he's excited. And I have just one more letter though I want to show, which is a little more recent, and this is also written to mon-bebe. So let's look at that one real quick. In this letter, I can see that he wrote much more quickly than the last one. Now, it still looks nice, just like the last one, but you can tell that he wrote this quickly because you can see that he connected the strokes of each letter in a syllable with the next letter. So that means he was starting the next syllable before he finished the previous one. And you can even see this in the numbers, 2025. The end of his 2 goes up into the start of the stroke for the 0. But you can see it really well toward the end where he writes, 우리 올해에도 많이 만나자, meaning let's meet a lot this year too. The first word here, 우리, you can see that he rushed to write the 이응, the circle letter, because he started and ended that letter in different spots when it's supposed to connect at the top. And then he flicked the end of that letter into the start of the vowel 우 to make ooh, like that. In fact, I think that he started rushing more toward the end of this letter because when he wrote 우리, the li part uses the smooth snake instead of how he normally writes it at the first letter in a syllable, like in the sentence 기다리느라. You can see the ra at the end is how he normally writes it. But still, even if we say that this was written quickly, he still has the nicest writing in the group and it still looks really smooth and professional. And if they made an official font out of his writing, I would occasionally use it in my videos. Okay, I could keep going on, but we still have 3 more members to get to, so I think that's enough for this episode.
I wish you have a good day, bebe. Bye. 안녕히 계세요. Bye bye. Bye.
If you like this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to my channel for more content like this, as well as free Korean lessons. Thank you to my Patreon supporters and channel members. There's a link that you can visit to help support my channel in the video description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next episode where we're going to look at KIHYUN. 그럼 다음에 또 봐!